Welcome to another exciting episode of Musa and Show. Here is what we have today.
Sanibona njengoba namuhla eParliament bekukhulunywa about Africa Day, kukhulunywa nje nge-Africa. Kukhona obemeli economic freedom fighters engizomcaphuna la obekhuluma lapho. Kodwa ngithe ngaphambi kokuba ngikhulume ngaye ngizobuyela emumva kancane ngicaphune uDr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi.
Issues. We've got critical minerals that you want to fuel the growth of your own economy and reindustrialize. So we have that on offer, including rare earth minerals.
Video mayiqhubeka ngiqale ngingayisho manje. Inhloso yami ngale video le uzoyizwa ivideo mayiqhubeka. Kodwa ngifisa ukuzicaphuna zonke lezi zinto. I-argument yomkhonto wesizwe party ngizoyi-avoida ngamabomu kwamanje. Mhlawumbe mase ngenze enye ivideo ngizoyifaka ngoba angifuni ukufaka umkhonto wesizwe party ngiphinde ngifake futhi uJacob Zuma. Ngifuna ukufaka uJacob Zuma because uJacob Zuma represent umkhonto wesizwe party.
Secondly, this new generation needs to understand that we have to come to the world stage together as a continent to negotiate tariffs of the United States, to negotiate tariffs and trade deals with China or Russia. We need to say, this is an African interest. Define it in clear terms. Go to the table as a united actor. And it's not going to happen if your political science is studying South Africa only. You need to know what's happening in the Congo. You need to know what's happening in Lesotho. You need to know what's happening, what is the political economy of Swaziland and Zimbabwe. You've got to know because the path to that developmental future lies with a united effort. I'm not talking about this irresponsible borderlessness, where you commit a crime here with the hope that you will run to Dar es Salaam and not be found. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a common destination, gradually developed, gradually agreed upon, infrastructure programs that make trade possible. So countries like China, certainly like Japan, United Nations, European Union as well as the United States, come here. Do you think they will know what is an African interest if Africans don't define that interest? They are going to get in a trade deal and you're going to cry all the time like victims. You've got political power. Why teach us Mandarin? Teach us political economy. It doesn't matter what language we speak. We just want our resources to benefit the African people. That's the education we are looking for. And I'm saying it is precisely that determination. If you don't develop it here, if you don't pressure each other through pure peer pressure, to have a political will as strong as the strongest metal in the continent, with the preparedness to sacrifice, you're not going to develop the African continent.
Isizathu esenza ukuthi ngifake le nkulumo kaDr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi esibalekile esihamba phambili lesasivezayo sokuthi uma sizimisele ngokuthi sifune Africa noma iSouth Africa abantu bakhona baphuma enhluphekweni funa kungaphuma emqondweni wethu ukuthi ngeke sikwenze sisodwa lokho sokwenza ngokubambisana usho ukuthi fanele iAfrica iunite ukuze ikwazi ukuthi ikwazi ukuthi Africa ngokwayo ikwazi ukutrade yodwa kuqala freely ikwazi ukutrade freely. Emveni kwalapho bese ke iAfrica izokwazi ukubhekana namazwe ihlangene ikhuluma ngazwi linye ngoba umihlukene la angeke uze kulunge. Into yokuqala yafika yenziwa abamhlophe uma bezonqoba iAfrica ukuthi kube neBerlin Conference ang 1884 if I'm not mistaken. La bafike bahlukaniselana khona ngeAfrica. iBritain athatha ingxenye ethize, France athatha ingxenye ethize. So into yokuqala bafike bayenza ukuze bayinqobe iAfrica ukuyehlukanisa. Ngakho ibalekile lento eshiwo Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi la ibaleke ngendlela eyisimanga. Ngifuna ukuthi ngiqhubeke nayo kodwa ngifisa ukuthi ngikubeke. Yingakho uma ulalela abobaba abanjengo Oliver Tambo ekutshela ukuthi besihlangane nabaseZimbabwe, nabase Swaziland, nabase Lusaka eZambia, i-ANC isikhathi yayidingiswe la yayikwazi ukuthi ibhaciswe eLusaka ngoba babe understand labo baba ukuthi uma sihlangene sokwazi ukuyinqoba. Ukuze i-ANC ifuna ukuthi kube nama-negotiations ukuthi yabone eZimbabwe ukuthi kwahlalwa phansi kwakhulunywa kwaziwa nesisombululo iyona nto eyenza ukuthi inkululeko basheshe bayithole nabo bese bethi cha asibone ukuthi singenze njani ngoba babe sebenza ngokubambisana.
And it starts with radical Pan-Africanism, continental unity. What happened at the Berlin Conference, where the scrabble for Africa took place? These people cut the country, the continent of the African continent like they were cutting cake. They didn't care that Basotho, they could cut Unotsua one day, Rakhadiwa how? Ili a foreigner. Tomorrow, literally, today, you belonged to one country. Tomorrow, she's a foreigner. They cut the Banyamulenga in between. They cut so many communities in between. Amaswati, Batswana, Basotho, people who belong together. Today, they think they are foreigners to each other. You were not even invited. Your opinion was not even asked as to which border must take place at which part. These borders you were not consulted for. But the premise of Pan-Africanism is to accept that what God created were states that are generally not viable. But at the center, economic progress has to happen at a continental level. Pan-Africanism probably is, and that's why we need a renaissance. The movements across the continent have a situation where it is possible to declare that African unity is not being pursued. Let's take Ibrahim Traore, for instance. Ibrahim Traore and his generation take over the country in a coup to resist French control of Burkina Faso, specifically French control of natural resources in Burkina Faso. What does the organization called ECOWAS, which is the West African Economic Community, do? They basically condemn them. Not only do they condemn them, they expel them from the association. They don't join them by dismantling neo-colonial control of African resources by the West. That tells you there is no, Pan-Africanism means there must be African solidarity and a common objective for a total control of our resources, total control of our destiny. And so it's possible to say that, but it once lived, and it lives as an idea, but we have to, all of us, be committed to making it realizable out there. It means right here in this department, part of the political education that happens here is to make sure that you people love your continent. You're not going to solve anything. The generations that come before you were not conscious of the fact that the development of this place called Africa is impossible without the unity of Africa.
Yingakho ngikubone kubalekile ukufaka le video ka Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi ngoba iyakuveza manje ukuthi lento Pan-Africanism iyakhulunywa kodwa abaholi bethu abakhombisa ukuthi kufanele kuhlanganwe ilungise ibe into eyodwa. Nansi ngento ebuhlungu kunayo yonke. Ngifisa ukucaphuna ke manje ivideo ka Jacob Zuma. Ngaphamba ngifike nje kule video le EFF okuyiyona yenza ukuthi ngigcine ngikhuluma ngenza le video le kodwa ngifisa ukucaphuna le ka Jacob Zuma. Emveni kwayo ke ngizobe sengicaphuna le EFF. Ngikubona kubalekile lento ezikhulunywa kulama video ukuthi ngizicompile ngizilethe kuwe ukuze nawe wazi ukuthi Africa ukuze iphume enhluphekweni nasencindezelweni ebhekene nayo angeke ikwenze country by country kodwa iyokwenza as continent ibambisene.
The question of Africa and its history and the developments globally, I think should be taken from what they are,
without assumptions. Today we are talking about the globalized world. If the world is globalizing, why should there be a question about Africa? That Africa must remain somewhere when everybody is working together, really. I think since the end of the Cold War, the world is working together. There's no country that is isolated. China has a lot of relations with UK, USA. Africa as a region, why must it be singled out for some views, so to speak? I don't think, in my own understanding, much as the question are understandable, but I think it's being unfair to Africa. Why should Africa be told who must have relations with and not this one and that one? I don't think that talks to our acceptance of globalization. We are globalizing, and Africa must be part of globalization. And you can't say we are globalizing because we have relations with certain regions, not other regions. And if we have relations with other regions, then we are questioned. Nor do I think countries that come to interact with Africa should be questioned. Why are you doing it? I think it is in the nature of globalization that, in fact, Africa is saying it can no longer be bypassed by events that change the world. We are part of it. And that's why we relate to the bigger countries, bigger economies. We want the relationship, as President Obama was saying, that benefits both. Because historically, the kind of relations we had with other regions were one-sided. All what the President was saying, that we want localization to be taken into account, whoever is trying to make relations with us, beneficiation of our resources, so that they benefit us. We ourselves, as another kind of area, we have said we need to do trade among ourselves, inter-trade in the continent of Africa. We are putting our 5 economic regions together so that we work as a continent together. We are having massive program in terms of the infrastructure to implement what you are talking about, to create that necessary platform, so that whoever comes to invest, we don't ask, are you an American, are we a Chinese? No, we enter into the relationship that must benefit both. And I'm happy that the United States share that view as well. So that is how these interactions are interpreted insofar as the African continent is concerned. We have been growing to speak with one voice, and we are now speaking in one voice as a continent. And that's why we look at those who try to pull one country this side and the other that side. That's why even the relations that we have with other regions, we are trying to do them as a unit, as an entity, as a region, rather than as individual countries. So that's what is happening. So we don't regard those who come to us that they are coming here because of other reasons that we don't know. We take them genuinely that we are establishing relations that must benefit us, who must also appreciate the history of the continent, where we come from, why we are lagging behind, what is that they could do to help us in terms of the relationships that we have to move forward as well.
Umumlalela kahle la Babu Jacob Zuma ukubeka ngokucacile ukuthi Africa manje sekufika isikhathi la khona ingafanelanga ihlukaniswe, kodwa Africa ufuna ikhulume one voice. Okwesibili akubekayo la ukuthi kufanele makunegotiatewa kuvela ukuthi what's in it for them, izogainani Africa uma kwenzeka zonke lezi zinto. Ngicabanga ukuthi lento ade show Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi iyahambelana ngqo nale show uJacob Zuma la ukuthi iAfrica ufuna ikhulume ngazwilinye, futhi Africa ufuna makunegotiatewa ibe sesigabeni la ethi khona okay siyakuzwa ukuthi uzo-investa lokho, kodwa manje what's in it for thina, sizobenefitani njenge-Africa, hayi njenge-South Africa, hayi njenge-Zimbabwe, Mali noma yiphi country kodwa njenge-Afrika ngoba uzo-invest e-Afrika. And okwesibili akuvezayo la ukuthi i-Afrika afuna ukwazi ukutrade yodwa ngoba into eyenza ukuthi ingakwazi ukutrade yodwa ila mabhoda nale mthetho ekhona la kumabhoda. Ngizobe kuchaze lokho ngelinye ilanga mhlawumbe ngeke ngikwazi ukukuchaza la. Ngenza le video ngaphambi ngicaphuna ivideo ye-EFF kune video ephazamisa umqondo wami ngicela uzwe la.
Issues. We've got critical minerals that you want to fuel the growth of your own economy and reindustrialize. So we have that on offer, including rare earth minerals.
Uthi president kunama minerals la abazwa offer, uthi we have them on offer, bazwa off mahala bazomnika upresident Trump ukuthi afuel i-economy yakhe. Then le nkulumo kade isho uZuma ayikho kule nkulumo esho upresident Ramaphosa. What's in it for iAfrica? Izogainani? Usho ukuthi kwasetshenziswa ama minerals enye country ukuze kuvuke economy enye country kodwa yakhe country ingekho right. Kahle kahle ngicane ngilalele nenazi isilungu ingakho ngenza le channel ngesizulu ngoba isilungu ngibuye singishiye la endleleni. Mhlambe imongezwanga kahle ngicela onolwazi angichazele. Ngizocaphuna i-EFF man kodwa le video yawuhlupha umqondo wami ngoba angitholi kwenzakalani.
Greetings to the President and Commander-in-Chief of the EFF, the only leader that only does not shake South Africa, but has also shaken Washington, D.C. Greetings to the officials of the EFF, commissars, fighters, fellow South Africans, our African brothers and sisters in Africa and in the diaspora. This year marks 141 years of the infamous Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, a pivot moment where the Western powers petitioned Africa without a single African voice or mandate. This event effectively carved the continent into arbitrary borders rooted in colonial ambitions to extract Africa's wealth and the subjugation of African people. This partition was characterized by genocide, slavery, brutal dispossessions, and disregard of Africa as deserving of sovereignty and self-determination for and by its people. The legacy of partitioning Africa is most visible in Africa's resource extraction without local beneficiation, in political systems and governments modeled after colonial administrations, and economic structures that serves external interests and instead of fostering internal prosperity. Today, Africa is defined by the colonial borders, translating into multiple neo-colonial states. It is therefore judicious that we call on African leaders to unite and make Africa one again. As a united Africa and in line with AU's year 2025 theme of 2025 Year of Reparations, Justice for Africans and the People of African Descent through Reparations, we will be positioned to demand reparations for centuries of exploitation, violent mass destruction and underdevelopment imposed on us by colonial powers. Europe has left gaping wounds that still separate, manifested in poverty, inequality, disease and foreign exploitation. House Chairperson, please stop that rabble-rouse. The development and wealth of countries like France have been built on the exploitation of Africa. From the colonial era to the present day, France has been looting its former colonies. Even after independence, France maintained control of its former colonies through puppet regimes and military interventions. We must salute the bold historic move by countries such as Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. These are examples of African resistance to neo-colonial influence. We can no longer stomach exploitation and interference by colonial powers guides as support and bilateral relations. The future of Africa can no longer be detected by our former colonies and colonial powers defined by the resolution of the ignoble Berlin Conference. Patrice Lumumba warned in 1959 that these divisions which colonial powers have always exploited and better to dominate us have played an important role and are still playing that role in suicide of Africa. If these words serve not as a clarion call on our African leaders to reflect on the importance of the unity of Africa on this African month, then the future of Africa is doomed and the idea of a United States of Africa will remain only a dream. We will continue to live under the shade of colonial borders and systems that were never meant for us. The Berlin Conference left Africa in shambles, and to this day, the continent knows no peace. Poverty and inequality are synonymous with Africa. Diseases have wreaked unimaginable havoc across the continent, while so-called investors arrive only to exploit our resources rather than contribute to the development of Africa. House Chairperson, let's be honest, South Africa is too ambitious on the G20 theme of solidarity, equality, and sustainability. We can never have an equal society in South Africa until, while majority of our people are living in squalor and in the informal settlements, townships, and villages that are in the outskirts and far from economic activities and infrastructure development. Equality remains an elusive dream until we can resolve unemployment, drug abuse, and end gender-based violence and femicide. Our economy is owned and controlled and caters only for the rich and exclude the majority of our people in the working class. At the end of November, when we hand over the G20 presidency, South Africa will still be in the same, or if not, far worse position than we currently are, as we have seen from the first quarterly labor force survey for 2025. There is no sustainability that we will achieve without nationalizations of mines, banks, and other strategic sectors of the economy. We still have industries that are monopolized and are controlled in the majority by the rich and those who've got means of production, while ordinary people are kept away. There can never be equality in South Africa while land remains in the hand of the majority. As the EFF were calling for expropriation of South Africa's land without compensation for equal redistribution in order to resolve inequality in our country. House Chairperson, I will not be doing justice if I was to sit down without having mentioned and supporting the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF, that his message that has been consistent, calling for expropriation of South Africa's land without compensation, has now reached the echelons of power, has reached the White House in Washington. Now, Chairperson, what we saw yesterday, it was a mockery to our democracy and a spit on the face of our democracy. We saw the billionaire Johan Rupert trying to represent South Africa. Johan Rupert does not represent me. He was not elected to be a government or a public representative of South Africa. He was there to represent his business interests. So the Commander-in-Chief, you must soldier on. We support you. The rest of Africa support you. Continue to call for United States of Africa. Continue to be a voice of reason for the people of Africa. Africans, let us rise up. Africa, let us unite. Not yet uhuru.
Yona video le eyenza ukuthi ngize ngenze ngirekhode le video. Ngiyacela ukuza ukuphawula kwakho mayelana yonke nje lenkulumo ebekiwe. Ngizwe ukuthi wena ubona kanjani. Ngoba mina ngesingami ngizwe nje ibalekile lento, ingakho ngiqale ngevideo ka Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, ngoba uyena ufike wayikhuluma kuqala lento ngingakayizwa. Ngithemba noma sengithola lama video lawo ngase ngibona no lento zishinto eyodwa ukuthi isifundo nje kufuneka sisithole ngesingami eyokuthi Afrika ukuze inqobe noma yipi inkinga ebhekene nayo ufuna kwenze lokho ebamisene. Yingakho nalabo abahlukanisi abanqobe Afrika tokuqala bayenza ukuyehlukanisa bababe beqonda ukuthi uma yehlukene bazokwazi ukuyinqoba. Ngiyacela ukuza ukuphawula kwakho mayelana nalolu daba. Ngiyafisa ukuzwa ukuthi wena ubona kanjani. Ngiyacela futhi usubscribe ku-channel, ushare, ulike, ucomment. Ungasupporta ngokujoin membership yale channel. Ungasupporta futhi ngokudonate noma ngamalini onayo kulekelela i-channel kwi-account ekhona kwi-comment ephiniwe. Ngalo kwalokho mina nawe sidibane kwivideo elandelayo. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.